Hey guys, tonight we slip back through the fog of deep time, to when your ancestors still walked barefoot on warm soil, when the air was thick with pollen and smoke, and the line between survival and curiosity was as thin as the thread of a spider's silk. You can almost smell it, the earth after rain, the wild resin on the breeze, the faint sweetness that lures you closer even though, if we're honest, you probably won't survive this age without a few tooth marks from something large and hungry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where in the world our little campfire circle stretches tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not yet the modern human of history books. You're lean, weathered, your skin is brushed with dust and sweat, and your tools are carved from stone and bone. Each morning, you rise with the sun, scan the horizon for berries, roots, and the glint of movement that might mean food or danger. The world is raw, unpredictable, and buzzing with life. And among the grasses, along riverbanks, a certain plant sways in the wind. Tall, serrated leaves. A distinct, almost musky fragrance. You don't have a name for it yet, but someday, we'll call it cannabis. You stumble upon it not because you're looking for a high, but because you're looking for something. Anything to eat, weave, or burn. Curiosity is the oldest human habit, after all. One day, you pick a few leaves and toss them on the fire, and the smoke rises, thick, aromatic, oddly calming. The air changes. So do you. Your muscles loosen. The chatter in your head quiets. And for a fleeting moment, you feel safe. Something rare in this age of saber-toothed skepticism. You don't call it being high. You call it peace. Now, historians still argue whether cannabis first captivated humans in Central Asia or in some forgotten patch of ancient Siberia. The oldest wild hemp pollen traces have been found across both, whispering of a plant that spread on its own long before we began following it. But whether it first brushed against your ancestors in Mongolia's high steppe or the river valleys of ancient China, the story begins the same way. A spark of scent, a flicker of warmth, and an almost cosmic, what if? You crouch beside the fire and notice the plant burns differently. Less smoke, more aroma. Later, you discover its stems are strong yet pliable. You twist them, braid them, and soon you've made a crude cord that holds your bundle of meat a little tighter. In a world where storage is just a hole in the ground, that's innovation. Somewhere, evolution gives you a tiny gold star. And then comes the other discovery, the seeds. They pop in the heat, smell nutty, and taste surprisingly good. Full of fat, rich in protein. You might not know chemistry, but your instincts know energy when they taste it. A handful of roasted hemp seeds gives you strength for another long trek across the grasslands. To your tribe, that's magic enough. But not all encounters are accidental. Imagine a time when plants are more than background scenery. They're spirits, each with personality and power. Shamans, those early experimenters in consciousness, start to notice certain plants change perception. Cannabis is one of them. Under its influence, you might see patterns in the stars, hear voices in the wind, or feel your dead ancestors walking beside you. A modern skeptic might say it's just the THC, but back then, it's the voice of the gods. One fringe theory, still debated over mugs of coffee and data charts, is that early humans began domesticating cannabis not for its fibers or food, but for its mind-bending effects. Imagine that civilization's first farmer wasn't driven by hunger or clothing, but by curiosity about the divine. Whether that's true or not, you can't help but picture some half-awake ancestor, gazing at the horizon with dilated eyes, whispering, "What if the stars are just holes where the light of heaven leaks through?" The discovery spreads, like all good gossip. Tribes talk. Maybe one group shows another a new way to braid rope or preserve fish with hemp twine. Maybe someone laughs at the funny-smelling smoke and decides to pass it around instead of spears. Suddenly, you have something that binds people, not just in fiber, but in feeling. Picture it, A small band of foragers gathered around a campfire at dusk. The air hums with insects. Someone throws a handful of those fragrant leaves into the embers. The smoke curls, blue and soft. You inhale, cautious at first, then deeper. Conversation slows. The stars overhead shimmer a little brighter, like they're listening. For a moment, fear recedes. Hunger softens. You remember that you're alive, that you exist not just to hunt and hide, but to feel. That sensation, the blending of body, mind, and mystery, becomes a ritual. You might not call it religion yet, but it's a rehearsal for one. In that flickering circle of warmth and haze, humans begin to dream bigger. Of course, not every encounter with wild plants ends in transcendence. Sometimes curiosity goes sideways. Maybe a cousin of cannabis, similar leaf shape, different chemistry, knocks you flat for a day, and everyone agrees never to touch it again. Early science, in its purest form. Trial, error, and the occasional nap that lasts too long. You laugh about it later, because humor, even in prehistory, is medicine. Over generations, those who recognize the plant's value start carrying its seeds along their journeys. A few seeds tucked in an animal hide pouch travel miles beyond their birthplace. Every new sprout along the route becomes a kind of breadcrumb trail of human movement. You don't know it, but you're shaping botany's first great love story, a plant that evolves alongside you because you find it irresistible. The interesting part? Modern archaeologists have found 10,000-year-old hemp cords in ancient pottery shards from Taiwan and China. That's a mainstream historical fact. Solid proof that our ancestors didn't just stumble upon cannabis. They cherished it. It was useful, durable, and, let's admit it, a little fun. You might wonder how they figured out which parts of the plant to use. Trial and error again. The fibrous stalks for rope. The seeds for food. The flowers, those sticky, resinous buds, for rituals and healing. It's the prehistoric version of a full product line. Edible, wearable, and smokable. And then there's the sensory experience itself. Imagine your hands brushing over the leaves, the fine hairs catching sunlight, the smell clinging to your skin. You rub your fingers together, resin sticks, and soon you're licking it absent-mindedly, tasting the earth, the sweetness, the faint promise of something strange. Maybe you feel a little warm, a little light-headed. You don't know why, but you smile. Some researchers even suggest that humans' early attraction to aromatic plants like cannabis helped shape our brain's reward pathways, that the pleasure of smell, of subtle altered states, nudged us toward creativity and cooperation. It's poetic, isn't it? That art, language, and laughter might share DNA with curiosity about plants. The first hemp fields weren't really fields, just patches humans revisited. But each return left a trace. A footprint, a dropped seed, a fire pit edge. Slowly, humans began choosing where the plant grew best. Evolution, meet gardening. And then something almost mystical happens. The relationship deepens. The plant thrives where people dwell. People thrive where the plant grows. You begin to notice that places rich with hemp are easier to live in. More cord, more food, more comfort. The bond becomes symbiotic. Still, historians argue whether cannabis was first cultivated intentionally or simply followed humans who unknowingly spread it. Was it your ancestors who tamed the weed, or did the weed tame your ancestors? Either way, it worked. The species, both yours and the plant's, multiplied. Picture that ancient moment when one of your kin, crouching by a stream, realizes a pattern. The seeds dropped near damp soil sprout faster. That's agriculture's first whisper, an idea that will, thousands of years later, reshape continents. And just like that, cannabis goes from being a wild stranger to a companion species. The bond begins here, amid smoke and seed, hunger and wonder. You might laugh at how natural it all seems now, this ancient flirtation with getting slightly out of your head. But remember, back then, consciousness was a frontier as vast as the landscape. Any plant that could ease fear, lift mood, or blur the edges of mortality was a kind of sacred tool. So there you are, half human, half dreamer, holding a handful of green leaves, unknowingly beginning one of the oldest love stories on earth. A story not about addiction, but affection. Not about escape, but exploration. You don't worship the plant. You dance with it, learn from it, carry it forward. And it, in turn, learns to grow wherever you go. The wind rustles through the grasslands. Smoke curls upward, fragrant and slow. Your eyelids grow heavy, your thoughts drift soft and golden. You don't have words yet for what you feel, but someday your descendants will call it high. You wake to the hush of dawn, the horizon painted in pinks and golds, the kind of light that feels like a promise. The fire's gone to embers, a few lazy curls of smoke still drifting up, carrying the faint, familiar scent of the green plant that's been quietly reshaping your tribe's mornings. Last night wasn't just another fire. It was the beginning of a habit, a comfort, and, unknowingly, an early technology. You stretch, bones popping, and glance at the pile of fibers drying beside the stream. Those tough, fibrous stalks of cannabis that once seemed too stubborn to chew have turned out to be small miracles. You twist a few strands between your fingers, the same way you've twisted vines before. But these are different. They're longer, smoother, stronger. Before long, you're braiding them into a cord that can tie a stone blade to a wooden shaft. A simple act, but in your world, that's innovation worthy of legend. This is where cannabis begins to transcend curiosity. It's not just something you burn in the fire or munch on in lean times. It's something that helps you build, bind, and belong. The plant that soothes your nerves now weaves the first rope that drags a deer carcass home, secures a shelter flap, or even binds your first crude fishing net. Hemp, without meaning to, has just entered human industry. Historians still argue whether this discovery was sparked first by pure accident or by necessity. Maybe a forgotten bundle of hemp stalks was left in the river and softened, the outer bark peeling away to reveal the silky fibers beneath. Maybe you noticed that when twisted, these inner threads didn't snap like grass. Whatever the spark, it's the kind of eureka moment no one could ever put in a museum, but it's as important as the first spark of fire or the first chipped blade. And so, you become an artist without knowing it. Rope making becomes rhythm. Twist, fold, pull. The strands creak under tension, and the fibers catch the light like spun sunlight. There's a satisfaction in this quiet labor. You hum softly as you work, the way your people hum when they're content. Hemp's whisper joins the music of early humanity. Soon, your tribe realizes how versatile this plant truly is. Hemp cords strengthen baskets. Twine holds together tools and weapons. And when the stalks are soaked, pounded, and dried, they can even form a rough cloth, a kind of primitive textile. It's itchy and coarse, sure, but in an age of naked practicality, that's progress. Somewhere in the distance, a storm brews, and you're grateful for anything that can be wrapped around your shoulders. Then comes the ceremonial side. One evening, after a day of weaving and binding, a shaman gathers the remaining fibers and tosses them onto the fire. The resin burns with that same soothing aroma, and the smoke drifts through the camp. The group falls silent, watching the embers pulse like the heartbeat of the earth. You feel that same familiar warmth in your chest, the same deep, rhythmic calm. And in that moment, hemp becomes something else, something between tool and totem. A mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists have found hemp fibers embedded in pottery from over 10,000 years ago, which suggests your distant ancestors were already incorporating it into daily life long before formal agriculture began. It wasn't just a wild plant. They cultivated it because it served so many roles. In a way, cannabis was one of the first plants to become part of the human household. But beyond the functional and the familiar lies the mystical. Some of the oldest myths in human memory, later passed down through different tribes and tongues, speak of plants of the gods, of vegetation that bridged the mortal and the divine. While no one can prove cannabis was one of those earliest god plants, you can imagine the allure. A stalk that offers both survival and serenity? That's enough to earn a place in any myth. And, of course, the plant becomes a quiet part of barter. You meet travelers along game paths, sunburned strangers carrying stones, shells, and strange tales. One offers obsidian blades, another carries bundles of herbs tied in hemp string. There's a moment of silent understanding as you trade, not just goods but knowledge. You both nod, each recognizing that familiar scent. Across thousands of miles and countless generations, cannabis has begun whispering the same message to every human it meets: I can help. You begin experimenting with its many moods. Burn the dried flowers, and you drift into soft laughter. Chew the seeds, and your hunger fades. Twist the fibers, and your tools hold stronger. No wonder early humans might have seen the plant as alive in a different way, as a being with moods and gifts. You don't use it so much as collaborate with it. A few generations pass. The knowledge deepens. Your children grow up knowing the feel of hemp between their fingers. They know which stalks make the best fibers and which leaves smell happy. They inherit this bond, and with each retelling of its discovery, the plant's story gains a hint of reverence. Then one day, the shaman tells a story by the fire, how the plant grew from the tears of a goddess who pitied humankind for their pain and fear. Her tears sprouted in secret places, the story goes, and those who found the plants were blessed with courage and calm. Whether it's true or not, you find yourself believing it, if only because it feels right. That's how religion begins, not with commandments, but with comfort. Now, the interesting thing about ancient hemp isn't just its function but its fingerprints on culture. Across ancient Asia, archaeologists have uncovered primitive spindles and loom weights near remnants of hemp fiber, evidence that by the time humans began settling, the plant was already part of their domestic world. You can imagine early women sitting in the shade, twisting fiber into thread, sharing laughter and gossip as the scent of cannabis wafts from nearby fires. And yes, that scent. Even when it's not burning, it lingers. It clings to your hands, your hair, your tools. It becomes part of you, like smoke woven into your skin. Over time, you begin to associate that smell with safety, with home. It's the smell of survival, and a bit of rebellion against the cold indifference of nature. Of course, the world around you isn't static. Ice retreats, animals migrate, climates shift. The plant adapts alongside you, growing taller or bushier depending on where it's carried. Historians still argue whether it was your ancestors who spread cannabis across continents or whether it followed on its own, riding wind, water, and trade routes like a hitchhiker with ambition. But one thing's certain, it thrived wherever humans went. You start noticing something strange. Different patches of hemp grow differently, some taller and more fibrous, others shorter with thicker, resin-heavy buds. Without realizing it, you've begun selecting traits, early domestication by intuition. You don't call it breeding, but you're guiding evolution with your preferences. And with those changes come subtle shifts in how the plant makes you feel. Some stalks produce fibers that never snap. Others, when burned, bring sharper laughter or deeper calm. You start giving them nicknames, describing their moods the way you describe people. One's lazy smoke, another quick rope. The plant has entered your language. Even now, scientists debate how early humans managed to distinguish between hemp, used for fiber and food, and cannabis, used for psychoactive effects. Were they separate species yet, or variations of the same plant responding to climate and care? The answer hides in layers of soil and time. But in your hands, both kinds are sacred, the practical and the poetic growing from the same root. There's a humor in it, too. Imagine an elder in your tribe complaining, "The young ones are wasting good stalks on smoke again." It's a sentiment that would echo across millennia, all the way to modern debates. The generational divide, between the weavers and the dreamers, might just be humanity's oldest argument. Yet, in those moments when smoke softens the edges of fear, you realize something profound. Life is harsh, yes, but not without sweetness. The plant doesn't erase danger. It teaches you how to rest within it. That lesson, that fleeting sense of calm, is something your descendants will chase for thousands of years. So, the love story deepens. What began as an accidental sniff of smoke has become a partnership that shapes daily life. Hemp rope holds your world together. Hemp seed feeds your belly. Hemp smoke soothes your spirit. And though you don't know it, this relationship will one day lead to sails crossing oceans, paper carrying philosophies, and medicines easing pain. For now, though, you're simply a tired traveler in the cradle of time, sitting by a fire, twisting rope between your fingers. The night hums with insects. Your tribe murmurs nearby. You take a slow breath, and the faint, sweet scent rises again. You smile, half in dream, half in memory, thinking that perhaps the goddess of the green plant still watches over you. You blink against the glow of another campfire, the smoke rising in lazy spirals toward a sky so full of stars it looks like someone spilled salt across black velvet. The air is cool tonight, the grass damp against your bare ankles. The group has finished eating, a stew of roots and roasted meat, and now the stories begin. Someone hums a tune, another taps a rhythm on a hollow log. And then, like clockwork, someone tosses a handful of dried cannabis flowers into the flames. The smell unfurls like a memory, earthy, spicy, faintly sweet. The smoke curls and thickens, drifting toward the circle of faces. It doesn't choke you, it invites you. You lean closer, eyes watering slightly, but there's laughter in the discomfort. That's the thing about early smoke, there's no glass pipe, no precision, no warning label. It's just you, the fire, and a plant that seems to hum back when the wind blows through it. Smokes and smudges. You might call this era if you had words for eras. This is when fire itself becomes a tool not just for cooking or warmth, but for mood. Your ancestors discovered long ago that certain plants transformed when burned, their essence rising in invisible tendrils that altered thought and feeling. Cannabis, sage, juniper, myrrh. Each smoke had a spirit. Some healed, some soothed, and some, like this one, invited you to see things differently. Historians still argue whether early humans understood what was happening when they inhaled these fumes. Was it ritual? Was it recreation? Or was it simply practical? Keeping insects away while accidentally making everyone a little more relaxed about existence? The truth is probably all three. Tonight, the tribe gathers closer. The smoke softens your perception. The stars seem to breathe in rhythm with you. Someone begins a story about a hunter who chased the moon, and as they speak, the line between imagination and memory blurs. You're not just listening, you're seeing it. The moon becomes a face. The hunter's spear becomes a beam of silver light. For a brief, enchanted moment, the whole group inhabits the same dream. That's the magic of early cannabis smoke. It turns shared breath into shared vision. It bonds you not through words, but through wonder. The fire pops, laughter echoes, and you realize that something deeply human is happening here. Storytelling elevated by altered perspective. Of course, it's not all transcendent mysticism. Someone always coughs too hard and makes a dramatic exit, waving the smoke away with watery eyes. You laugh, slap their back, and tease them for being too delicate for the spirits. Humor, it seems, thrives even under the influence. You start experimenting, burning different parts of the plant, drying it longer, grinding it finer. Sometimes it works better. Sometimes it just stinks. Early chemistry at its most enthusiastic. The discovery that the resin-coated flowers produce stronger effects spreads quickly. The shamans take notice. What was once a casual campfire curiosity becomes sacred smoke. In time, those same shamans begin to use the smoke deliberately during rituals. They inhale deeply before chanting, letting their minds slip sideways into that shimmering, half-dream state where messages from ancestors supposedly echo. Whether it's truly divine communication or simply the gentle confusion of cannabinoids, no one can say. But to the people gathered, it feels real. A mainstream historical fact. In 2019, archaeologists discovered 2,500-year-old wooden braziers in western China containing charred cannabis residue, proof that ancient people were burning the plant deliberately in enclosed spaces, possibly for ritual intoxication. Imagine that. The same fragrant smoke that now drifts from modern incense burners once filled a Bronze Age tent somewhere in the Pamir Mountains. Thousands of years, same plant, same idea. Light, breathe, transcend. As time passes, the act of burning cannabis takes on layers of meaning. It becomes part of funerals, sending smoke to guide the departed into the next world. It becomes part of healing ceremonies. Smoke used to clean sickness from the body. And sometimes, it's just part of relaxing after a long day of chasing mammoths and avoiding existential dread. You can picture a weary hunter muttering, "I need a puff before I even think about tanning that hide." There's something communal about it too. Smoke refuses to stay with one person. It drifts, mingles, unites. You breathe what your neighbor breathes, and in that shared air, the tribe becomes one organism. Many hearts beating to the same rhythm, many thoughts drifting toward the same horizon. That's not just ritual, that's social glue. And then there are the strange side effects. Heightened senses, distorted time, waves of laughter that come out of nowhere. The night feels longer, or maybe shorter, you can't tell. Food tastes better, music sounds deeper, and your thoughts wander into places they've never gone before. The shaman grins knowingly. The plant shows you what you already know, he says, though no one's sure if that's profound or just stone philosophy. But this experimentation isn't limited to humans alone. You notice animals getting curious too. Sheep, goats, even dogs sometimes nibble on fallen leaves and stagger about with dreamy eyes. One evening, you watch a herd of goats munching from a patch of cannabis plants, then wobbling like drunks at a feast. You laugh so hard you nearly drop your bowl. It's the earliest recorded animal study. No journals, just pure observation and giggling. There's a quirky tidbit researchers love to debate. Some anthropologists suggest that early humans may have learned about intoxicating plants by observing animals. The way reindeer seek out hallucinogenic mushrooms, or elephants gorge on fermenting fruit, it's possible your ancestors thought, if it's good enough for the goats, it's good enough for us. You can almost see it now, the world's first peer-reviewed experiment, conducted by very confused mammals. Eventually, the process gets refined. The shamans start building small clay bowls with holes, primitive braziers that let them control airflow. Some tribes carve wooden pipes or hollow out reeds to direct the smoke more precisely. It's an evolution of experience. Fire becomes technology, smoke becomes science, and humans, in their endless curiosity, invent the concept of a better hit. Historians still argue whether these early smoking tools were used exclusively for cannabis or also for herbs and resins like frankincense. Either way, the innovation marks a turning point. The act of burning becomes deliberate, ceremonial, a bridge between worlds. By now, the smoke's role in society has deepened. Children are kept at a distance when the shamans perform, but they watch, wide-eyed, from the shadows. They see the elders breathe in and sway, their voices slow and melodic, their gestures smooth like underwater dance. To those children, it looks like magic, real, tangible magic rising from the fire. And maybe, in a way, it is. But of course, even in ancient times, there are skeptics. Somewhere in your group is the person who mutters, "It's just smoke." Maybe they refuse to partake, preferring the clarity of an unaltered mind. Maybe they roll their eyes at the shaman's visions, convinced it's all imagination. It's funny how every era has its rationalists, those who stand outside the circle, watching everyone else laugh at invisible jokes. But even they can't deny the power of the moment, the way the smoke seems to gather the tribe into one gentle pulse. You take a deep breath, and for a second, you feel yourself dissolve into the night, the boundaries between you, the fire, and the stars fading. It's not escape, it's connection. You think of your ancestors, those who came before and those who'll come after. Maybe this is what the plant wants, to remind you that you're part of something vast, living, and cyclical. The fire crackles. Sparks drift upward like tiny suns. Someone strums a stringed bow, its note trembling through the air like a heartbeat. You laugh softly, your voice melting into the hum of the group. There's a moment when everything feels exactly right, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. And just as suddenly, the trance breaks. Someone sneezes. The spell shatters into laughter. You cough, wipe your eyes, and realize that enlightenment, like smoke, is fleeting. But maybe that's the point. When the embers finally fade, you crawl into your hide blanket, the scent of smoke clinging to your hair. The stars blur as your eyes close. In your dreams, the smoke returns, not from fire this time, but from memory. It dances and twines through the darkness, carrying whispers of everything you've seen and everything yet to come. And somewhere, beyond the edge of sleep, the green plant sways in the moonlight, its leaves glistening like silver hands waving you onward. Morning drifts in soft and golden, the air damp with dew and the faint tang of ash from last night's fire. You wake slowly, the world still hazy around the edges, your breath tasting faintly of smoke and dreams. The camp stirs, the soft shuffle of feet, the clatter of stone tools, the half-sung murmurs of morning tasks. You rise, stretch, and feel the pull in your muscles, the ache in your joints, the faint exhaustion that living close to nature demands. But there's something else waiting for you today, something your people have been refining almost as carefully as their weapons, the healing art of the green plant. Medicine, magic, and the mundane all mingle here, blurring into one another like smoke through sunlight. When someone falls ill, you don't have doctors, thermometers, or tidy pills. You have experience, centuries of watching, trying, and remembering. You know which roots draw out fever, which leaves soothe a burn, which sap stops bleeding. And now, your people have noticed that cannabis does something subtle but remarkable. It calms. One of the elders, a woman with hands calloused from grinding seeds, has begun boiling the leaves in water. The result is bitter but oddly comforting. She offers it to a boy shivering with chills, his face pale from infection. He sips, grimaces, and then relaxes, the tremors easing, his eyes softening as sleep takes him. The tribe calls it a miracle. She calls it observation. Historians still argue whether early humans understood the true medicinal properties of cannabis, its anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving effects, or whether they simply stumbled into them through repetition. But one thing's clear: your ancestors were not as ignorant as we like to imagine. They knew, in their quiet, intuitive way, that this plant could soothe both body and spirit. By now, you've seen it used in countless ways. The crushed leaves pressed against wounds to ease swelling. The smoke blown over feverish children to chase away bad air. The seeds mixed into meals for those too frail to hunt. Some of these methods seem practical, others more like magic, but that distinction doesn't exist yet. When the world itself feels alive, every cure is both science and spell. There's a kind of sacred rhythm to this life. The shaman collects herbs at dawn, speaking softly to the plants, asking permission. You follow, watching the ritual unfold. He never takes too much from one place. He touches the soil before cutting, smearing his fingertips with earth as though reminding himself that he and the plant are kin. Then he places the leaves into a woven hemp pouch, humming a low tune that seems to vibrate in the bones. Later, by the fire, he grinds the leaves between smooth stones, mixing them with animal fat and a pinch of ash. The paste smells pungent, but when he rubs it into a woman's aching knee, her grimace fades into relief. You don't need to understand chemistry to see that something real has happened. Her pain lessens, her breath evens. Around you, the group murmurs their approval. A mainstream historical fact: in ancient China's earliest medical texts, like the legendary Shenong Ben Chao Jing, hemp was already described as a valuable remedy for pain, fatigue, and forgetfulness of worries. That's thousands of years later than your campfire, yes, but it's evidence that this knowledge carried forward through time like a quiet echo. The seeds of that wisdom were planted right here, among the smoke and whispers of prehistory. And yet, the line between medicine and mysticism remains blurry. When the shaman mixes herbs, he doesn't think in molecules, he thinks in spirits. A leaf that grows near water is believed to carry the calm of rivers. A plant that thrives in harsh sun holds the fire of courage. Cannabis, with its strange dual nature, useful, beautiful, intoxicating, becomes a symbol of balance. It teaches that pain and peace live side by side. Sometimes, though, healing isn't about the body at all. It's about fear, the invisible sickness that seeps into the tribe when hunts fail or storms linger. In those times, the shaman lights a small fire inside the shelter, feeding it dried cannabis leaves and wild sage. The smoke curls through the air, thin and steady, while everyone breathes deeply, letting the heaviness lift. You can almost feel the worry dissolving, the tension melting away. There's a soft joke among the group. Even the spirits get sleepy from that smoke. It's whispered with a grin, half reverence, half amusement. Humor is, as always, the best medicine. You sit by the healer's side one evening, watching as he uses a hollow bone tube to blow warm smoke over a man's swollen leg. The air smells sharp and green, the man's breathing shallow. Slowly, his body relaxes. The pain doesn't vanish, but it quiets, like a storm fading into drizzle. The plant carries warmth, the shaman mutters, and warmth tells the body to remember how to rest. The lesson isn't lost on you. In a world where danger never sleeps, the ability to rest is revolutionary. And yet, not everyone trusts this leafy miracle. Some fear that the plant's powers can backfire, that overuse dulls the mind or invites trickster spirits. A few claim that people who spend too long in the smoke lose touch with reality, wandering in dreams too long. Historians still debate whether these ancient fears reflect superstition or an early understanding of psychological balance. Either way, your people learn to respect the plant as much as they rely on it. There's a pattern in all this, an ancient trial-and-error science that echoes down to modern medicine. Pain relief, relaxation, appetite stimulation, it's all there, hidden in ritual and song. The healers might not describe it in medical terms, but they know its effects intimately. They know, for instance, that certain plants, when burned together, create stronger calm. Cannabis mixed with poppy or myrtle, for instance, becomes something potent, a smoky lullaby. One night, an elder near death asks for such a blend. The shaman obliges, filling the shelter with thick, fragrant haze. You sit nearby, holding the elder's hand as his breathing slows. He smiles faintly, eyes unfocused, and whispers, "The air tastes sweet." Those are his last words before his chest stills. The tribe falls silent, but there's no fear, only awe. It feels as though the smoke has carried him somewhere safe. You think about that moment long after the fire dies. Maybe the plant isn't just medicine, it's a doorway. A way to soften the passage between pain and peace, between life and whatever waits beyond. Of course, the next morning, practical life resumes. Someone trips over a log, sprains an ankle, and you're right back to poultices and smoke. The sacred and the mundane are inseparable, and that's the quiet beauty of it all. There's also laughter in medicine. Children teasing the healer for his stinky soup, the elders pretending to swoon dramatically when given bitter infusions. Humor, again, keeps fear small. Every time the tribe shares that laughter, the plant's power grows, not in mysticism, but in memory. And perhaps the most remarkable thing is how naturally all this fits into daily life. There's no sense of taboo yet, no drug, no moral weight. Just a green ally in a green world. When someone's hurt, you fetch leaves. When someone's anxious, you light smoke. When someone's dying, you bring both. Healing is not about fixing, it's about easing. Modern researchers would later confirm that cannabis indeed reduces pain, inflammation, and anxiety. But here, in your world of raw survival, those aren't medical conditions. They're simply life. The plant doesn't make you superhuman. It just reminds you to breathe. As the days stretch into weeks, you start to notice something subtle. The more the tribe uses cannabis for healing, the more peaceful they become overall. Arguments grow shorter. Children sleep better. The camp feels lighter. You can't help but wonder if the plant is doing more than soothing bodies. Maybe it's softening hearts. Still, the shaman warns against greed. Too much of any spirit, he says, and it stops helping, it starts hiding. You remember that. You've seen it yourself. Someone who spends too many evenings lost in smoke, forgetting their tasks, their firewood, their hunger. Balance is everything. By sunset, the sky is a smear of orange and violet. The shaman crushes a few more leaves between his palms and tosses them into the fire, murmuring thanks. The smoke rises, fragrant and calm. You watch it twist into the dark, thinking that somewhere above, perhaps the ancestors breathe it in too. Your eyelids grow heavy. The world narrows to embers and whispers, the scent of resin and ash, the memory of warmth spreading through tired limbs. The night is gentle, and so is the medicine. You think, just before sleep takes you, that maybe this plant doesn't just heal wounds, it heals time itself, turning every fleeting life into something a little softer, a little kinder. The next stretch of your journey takes you beyond the familiar circle of firelight, across the long plains where the sky feels so enormous it seems to bend downward and press against your shoulders. You walk under it, dusty feet padding across the dry earth, tracing the ancient trade routes that your people are slowly beginning to shape. These trails aren't marked by signs or boundaries yet, just faint memories, where the herd once moved, where the streams once swelled, where the tribes once met to exchange what mattered most. Stories, salt, and the occasional secret plant. Trade, in these days, is less about currency and more about curiosity. You bring what your land grows easily, flint, dried meat, carved bone, and return with the exotic. Shells from the coast, pigments from the mountains, strange seeds that smell of unknown rain. And tucked among them, perhaps wrapped in a strip of soft hide, lies a different kind of treasure. Cannabis from a distant valley, with thicker leaves and a richer scent than your own. You rub the resin between your fingers, and it sticks like honey, glistening green gold in the sunlight. This is where cannabis starts to travel, where it stops being a local curiosity and begins its quiet conquest of the ancient world. Archaeologists have found traces of hemp seeds and pollen scattered from Central Asia to the Indian subcontinent, from the mountains of Siberia to the riverbanks of Mesopotamia. The plant doesn't move on its own. It moves with people, with you and your kind, restless and always reaching for something new. By now, you've seen the plant used for more than healing. Traders speak of it as a commodity, a thing of value, traded like obsidian or salt. In some regions, people grow entire fields of hemp, not for its high, but for its fiber. They twist its stalks into rope, weave it into fabric, and even use it to patch cracked boats. There's a running joke that if humans ever fall out with the gods, hemp will be the last thing holding the world together. Literally. And it's true. Hemp becomes the silent backbone of civilization. Before bricks and cities, before alphabets and laws, there are ropes, nets, and clothes, all spun from those resilient fibers. A mainstream historical fact. By the Neolithic period, around 10,000 years ago, hemp textiles were already appearing in China and Taiwan, making them some of the earliest known examples of human weaving. Every thread in those ancient fabrics carries the faint aroma of resin, a reminder that even practicality can grow from pleasure. But you, wandering trader that you are, see more than material value. You notice how the plant changes from tribe to tribe, how its meaning shifts with each new landscape. In one valley, it's treated as medicine. In another, as a sacred offering. In yet another, it's simply smoked for the joy of it, an early form of recreation that would later scandalize empires. You sit among strangers, watching them share a pipe carved from bone, laughter spilling out between coughs. For a brief moment, there are no borders, no languages, no rivalries. Just the universal sound of people getting slightly too relaxed. There's a warmth to that shared smoke, a kind of diplomacy no chieftain could invent. The plant becomes a bridge long before the word bridge, is invented. It softens tempers, blurs suspicion, and replaces fear with curiosity. Historians still argue whether cannabis influenced early human cooperation or merely reflected it, but you can feel it in the air tonight. Peace is easier when everyone's mellow. Still, not every encounter is friendly. You visit another group farther south, taller people with painted faces, who guard their herbs like sacred fire. When you ask about their smoke rituals, their leader squints suspiciously and says, "Not for trade. For the gods." He gestures toward a stone altar where bundles of dried herbs, some recognizable, some strange, smolder in the dusk. The smoke rises in pillars, carrying prayers upward, or so they believe. You step closer and catch that unmistakable whiff again, the green sweetness of cannabis layered among myrrh and grass. You realize that this plant has already become something more than trade. It's transcended function. It's now faith. A quirky historical tidbit. Researchers once discovered 2,700-year-old cannabis flowers in a burial mound in China's Xinjiang region. Perfectly preserved, they were likely placed there as offerings for the dead, or perhaps as comfort for the journey beyond. In other words, even ancient dealers offered take-home packages for the afterlife. As you walk through campfires and tents, you notice a pattern emerging. Wherever humans settle, the plant follows. It adapts like we do, thriving in dry heat, cold winds, or lush valleys. It's as if the two of you are partners in migration, evolving side by side. And in some strange poetic way, it's true. As humans spread across continents, cannabis spreads too, quietly weaving its green thread through the fabric of prehistory. You pass through what will one day be called the Indus Valley. The nights here are warm, and the air smells of spice and smoke. You sit by a group of locals who offer you a drink, thick, creamy, sweetened with honey and milk. You sip it, curious, and feel the slow warmth of cannabis spreading through your chest. They call it bang. It's a ritual drink for celebration, a social glue. To dance better, one of them says, grinning. And to forgive faster. You laugh, nearly choking on your own sip. Somewhere else, far away, the Scythians are doing something similar, only louder. They throw hemp seeds onto hot stones inside their tents, letting the air fill with fragrant steam. Then they shout, sing, and laugh until they can barely stand. Herodotus, the old Greek historian, would later write about it with equal parts fascination and judgment, describing how these nomads howled with pleasure. You can almost hear him clutching his toga in moral panic. And here's where history becomes deliciously ironic. For all the centuries to come, rulers will build monuments, issue decrees, and start wars, but it's this plant that will quietly link everyone together. While empires rise and fall, cannabis just keeps growing, unimpressed, unstoppable, delightfully democratic. You spend months moving along the ancient Silk Road before it even has that name, watching trade evolve from barter to something almost poetic. A sack of grain for a strand of beads. A pouch of resin for a song. You see hemp ropes being used to lash cargo, hemp oil lamps lighting the night, and hemp paper carrying the first crude sketches of what might someday be writing. The plant isn't just traded, it's teaching humans how to connect. Historians still argue whether cannabis was among the first globalized goods. Some claim spices or obsidian held that honor, others say it was salt. But when you look at those faint tracks in the sand, the worn grooves left by generations of wandering feet, you know better. This plant didn't just travel, it migrated, adopted, and integrated, like a green refugee that everyone secretly wanted to keep. Of course, not every trade route ends with peace. One night, a rival group ambushes your camp, trying to steal your packs. You fight, you flee, you lose a few bundles of herbs in the struggle. But when you finally make camp again, tired and scraped, someone lights a small bowl of cannabis. The familiar smoke drifts up, curling toward the stars. You exhale your fear. Laughter returns. Even in hardship, it's the plant that restores balance. By now, it's clear. Cannabis isn't just something humans found, it's something humans needed. You wonder if, deep down, it was always waiting for you to evolve enough to notice it. Maybe it watched, patient, as your ancestors learned fire, then tools, then language. Maybe it whispered, "When you're ready to slow down, I'll be here." A few days later, you reach a vast river where strangers are building what looks like the bones of a city. Hemp ropes tighten around stone blocks, pulling weight your arms could never manage alone. A builder grins at you and says, "Strongest rope in the world." You nod. The world itself seems to be woven from hemp. As night falls, you lie beside the riverbank, the hum of insects mixing with the laughter of traders. Someone passes a burning bundle around. You take a slow inhale and feel the day's ache melt into something weightless. Around you, languages mingle, the stars shimmer like embers, and the river murmurs the same lullaby it sung for 1,000,000 years. You realize that trade, medicine, spirituality, they're all just different ways of doing the same thing. Seeking connection. The plant, humble and green, is both tool and teacher. It reminds humans to cooperate, to listen, to share. It's not just part of civilization, it is civilization, sprouting from every corner of the earth where people decide that peace feels better than pain. The fire crackles low, and you close your eyes, drifting somewhere between sleep and memory. The scent of hemp and smoke lingers like an old story, one that's still being written. You're back on the move again, though the landscape looks different now, more organized, more deliberate. The wandering camps of your ancestors have turned into something steadier. Villages, then towns, and eventually cities where smoke rises not from scattered fires but from 1,000 clay chimneys. Civilization, as it turns out, is just what happens when humans finally stay put long enough to build fences and start complaining about taxes. And through it all, cannabis remains, adapting yet again, this time to the rhythm of temples and trade stalls, priests and scribes. What was once a foraged weed is now cultivated with intention. The fields stretch in neat rows, the stalks tall and waving like sea grass. It's no longer just a healer's tool or a traveler's comfort. It's agriculture now, and agriculture means culture. You walk through the gates of ancient Sumer, your sandals dusted with the silt of the Euphrates. The air smells of wet clay and smoke, of bread and bitumen. Somewhere, a temple drum echoes like a heartbeat. In the markets, you see baskets filled with hemp fiber, ropes, oils, and seeds. The merchants shout prices, the scribes record sales on clay tablets, and the whole city hums with the rhythm of invention. There's an old man by a stall selling fragrant bundles of herbs. "For pain," he says. "For love." You raise an eyebrow, and he laughs. "Same thing, really." You grin. Civilization has not dulled humanity's sense of humor. A mainstream historical fact. The ancient Mesopotamians were among the first to document the medicinal use of cannabis, referring to it as a remedy for pain and inflammation in cuneiform tablets dating back nearly 4,000 years. And those same civilizations, Babylonians, Assyrians, and later Persians, would carry that knowledge forward, blending science with superstition in a way only early humans could. But it's not all business and medicine. The temples, especially those dedicated to the goddess Ishtar, use cannabis smoke in their rituals. They believe it purifies the air, opens the mind, and helps the spirit speak clearly to the divine. You watch as priests in elaborate robes burn hemp and cedar together, their chants echoing through the marble corridors. The scent is heady, rich and thick with resin, and you feel your pulse slow just from breathing it in. Historians still argue whether these temple rites were genuinely spiritual experiences or simply very well-timed hotbox sessions. Either way, the result is the same: transcendence. You find yourself thinking about how every age reinvents its relationship with the same plant, how it always straddles the line between the sacred and the scandalous. You move on, crossing into Egypt where the Nile gleams like liquid glass under the sun. Here, the people are masters of ritual, obsessed with eternity and the fine details of death. Their tomb walls tell stories of gods and kings, of life after life after life. But they, too, have a soft spot for the plant. In Egypt, cannabis is known as shemshemet. It appears in hieroglyphs, in medicinal scrolls, and even in the famous Eber's papyrus, which recommends it for easing inflammation and treating eye pain. You meet a physician priest who demonstrates how it's used. He grinds the dried flowers into a paste, mixes it with honey, and applies it to a patient's swollen joints. The smell is sharp but pleasant. The patient groans in relief. You're not sure whether to call it medicine or magic, but by now, you've learned that it doesn't really matter. And then there are the whispers, stories that certain pharaohs used cannabis oil in their incense, believing it brought them closer to the gods. One priest confides that during long ceremonies, the smoke loosens the tongue of the divine. You can't help but wonder if the gods ever got tired of listening to so many loosened tongues. A quirky historical tidbit. Residue from ancient Egyptian burial jars has shown traces of cannabis, suggesting that even in death, they valued its calming properties. It's comforting, really, knowing that 4,000 years later, humans still reach for the same thing when they need to unwind. But there's more to it than smoke and ceremony. You notice that hemp fibers are woven into sails and ropes along the river. Egypt's mighty ships, those great wooden beasts that conquer both Nile and sea, depend on this plant to hold their world together. In that sense, cannabis isn't just a spiritual bridge, it's a literal one, carrying people across waters and centuries alike. You journey next toward the east, where the mountains rise like sleeping gods. In ancient India, you find a world saturated with devotion, a place where every action, from cooking to breathing, is an offering. Here, cannabis takes on yet another identity. It's not merely a medicine or a fiber, it's a God's gift. You hear its name whispered with reverence. Bang. In temples dedicated to Shiva, ascetics mix crushed cannabis leaves with milk, almonds, and spices, creating a thick, emerald drink. They sip it slowly before meditating, eyes half closed, bodies painted with ash. It helps still the monkey mind, one says, smiling faintly. The gods don't shout, they whisper. You must be calm to hear them. You try a small sip yourself. The taste is strange, sweet and bitter at once, and soon the edges of the world soften. The chants seem to pulse with rhythm, and your thoughts drift like clouds. You don't see gods, exactly, but you do feel an immense stillness, a peace that feels older than language. A mainstream fact. In Hindu tradition, cannabis has been sacred for millennia. The Atharva Veda, one of India's oldest spiritual texts, lists it among the 5 holy plants that relieve anxiety. The line could be printed on a modern dispensary wall, and it would still make perfect sense. Historians still argue whether cannabis truly played a major role in early Vedic rituals or whether later generations simply retrofitted it into mythology, but the connection feels genuine. Watching those holy men drink bang as they chant under the rising sun, you understand that for them, the plant isn't an escape. It's a key. And so, you see it happen again. A transformation. In Mesopotamia, it was medicine. In Egypt, a tool of both healing and death. In India, a bridge to divinity. The same plant, 1,000 meanings, each one reflecting the society that used it. Cannabis, it seems, is a mirror, showing humanity exactly what it most desires: relief, connection, transcendence. You end your day at the edge of the Ganges, sitting beside the river as twilight folds itself over the water. The smoke from temple fires drifts past like fragrant ghosts. Somewhere, a flute plays, a thin, trembling note that carries across the dusk. The priests are still chanting, the merchants are still bargaining, and the world keeps turning. You inhale, slow and deep. The scent of cannabis mingles with sandalwood and river mist. You think about all the hands that have touched this plant, all the lips that have breathed its smoke. Across continents and millennia, it's been medicine, rope, incense, offering, and yet, at its core, it remains what it's always been: a companion. A quiet green constant in humanity's restless journey. Before you sleep, a thought flickers in your mind, half memory, half realization. The shaman who once said, "Too much of any spirit, and it starts hiding." You smile. Civilization might have changed everything else, but not that truth. Even in the great cities, under golden domes and painted skies, moderation is still the secret to peace. The stars bloom overhead, bright as polished metal. The night hums with distant laughter, the shuffle of traders, the soft crackle of oil lamps. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can almost hear the heartbeat of the world, steady, smoky, and ancient. The world changes again beneath your bare feet. Kingdoms rise and crumble, languages twist into new shapes, and everywhere you go, the same green plant seems to reappear like an old friend who always finds your campfire. Time moves differently now. Bronze turns to iron. Farmers turn to soldiers. Wanderers become citizens, and stories become history. You stand at the edge of a bustling Greek port, the air thick with salt and ambition. Ships creak at the docks, their sails made of sturdy hemp cloth that catches the wind like a promise. Merchants shout in a dozen tongues, the market alive with everything from olives to scrolls to, yes, bundles of dried herbs that smell suspiciously familiar. You lean closer, pretending interest in pottery, but the trader gives you a knowing smirk. For thinking, he says quietly, tapping the pouch. And sometimes, for not thinking. That's the thing about humanity, we never quite agree on what the plant is for. Some call it a medicine, others a vice. Some see it as sacred, others as scandalous. But whether in temples or taverns, it's always there, lurking on the edge of our need for relief. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greeks and Romans used cannabis for practical and medical purposes. The Greek historian Herodotus, that same gossiping chronicler of the Scythians, mentioned the plant's use among nomads. Later, Greek physicians like Dioscorides would include it in their pharmacopoeias, noting its usefulness for easing earaches and swelling. Romans, ever the engineers, wove it into rope, sails, and even soldiers' clothing. Hemp quite literally held the empire together. But beyond the practical, there's a subtler, almost philosophical connection growing. You overhear a young student of philosophy, beard patchy but words passionate, explaining to his peers how the herb of calm helps him think without the chaos of too many thoughts. It untangles the mind, he says, so ideas can wander freely. You can't help but chuckle. The first stone philosopher, perhaps, trying to merge Plato with a little paranoia. Still, there's something genuine in it. For all their marble temples and grand theories, the Greeks understood the need for balance. Mind and body, reason and pleasure. Cannabis fits neatly into that philosophy, acting as both medicine and muse. And perhaps that's why it never disappears. It keeps adapting to the human condition, always reflecting our contradictions. You move on, crossing deserts and seas until you find yourself in Persia, where the air smells of spices and firelight, and the cities shimmer with tile and poetry. Here, cannabis, known as bang or hashish, finds a new kind of fame. It's not just a healer or fiber anymore. It's an art form. Alchemists experiment with distilling its resin, mystics write odes to its visions, and somewhere in the corner of a courtyard, a young poet whispers, "The world was dull until the leaf taught it color." Historians still argue whether early Persian mystics truly used cannabis to enhance their spiritual practice, but one thing's certain, the legends persist. Tales of Sufi poets and seekers who used the green key to unlock divine ecstasy echo through the ages. Some call it blasphemy, others call it revelation. Either way, it's history written in smoke rings. One night, in a small Persian garden, you find yourself sitting among such poets. They share a small bowl of resin, heated gently on a coal. The stars above are sharp as silver pins. Someone begins to recite. If wine brings laughter, the herb brings silence. Where laughter ends, the truth begins. The group sighs in approval. You feel it too, that curious blend of calm and clarity, where thought and stillness balance perfectly on the same breath. The night stretches long and soft, the conversation flowing from mathematics to metaphysics to the proper way to roast chickpeas. Humans, you realize, have always been masters of blending the profound with the ridiculous. A quirky historical tidbit. By the 9th century, Persian scholars had recorded recipes for cannabis-based candies and drinks. One famous treat, majun, combined hashish with nuts, honey, and spices, a kind of ancient cosmic brownie. The Caliphate banned it repeatedly, of course, which only made it more popular. Some things never change. From Persia, the plant travels west again, following the trade winds into North Africa and the Mediterranean. You walk through the narrow streets of Alexandria, where scholars gather in smoky rooms filled with scrolls. A physician in a white robe talks about using cannabis oil for melancholy of the soul. You nod. Modern terms would call it depression. The plant's role hasn't changed. We've just renamed the ailments. Historians still argue whether cannabis use among scholars was widespread or merely tolerated in secret, but the pattern remains. Where thought deepens, so does curiosity about the plant that quiets the noise. The centuries roll forward. Empires shift like sand dunes. You pass through Byzantine monasteries, where monks crush hemp seeds for oil lamps. In one corner, an elderly brother admits that the fumes make prayer feel lighter. He smiles mischievously and adds, "Not holier, just lighter." You grin back, imagining divine patience being tested by yet another drowsy chant. Then comes the Arab world's golden age of science and medicine. You find yourself in Baghdad, the city of peace, walking through libraries that smell of parchment and ink. Here, scholars debate astronomy, mathematics, and the nature of the soul, all while occasionally referencing cannabis in their medical texts. The physician Al-Razi lists it as a sedative and anti-inflammatory. Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, warns that too much leads to clouding of thought. It's the first recorded version of maybe just take one puff. Through all these centuries, cannabis has become the philosopher's paradox. Both grounding and freeing, a plant that connects you to the earth even as it opens your imagination to the sky. And then, darkness. The world shifts again. Armies march under crosses, and religion takes a harder edge. The plant that once bridged body and spirit now finds itself at odds with doctrine. In medieval Europe, cannabis becomes quietly practical again. Rope for ships, oil for lamps, fibers for clothes, but its psychoactive use retreats into shadows. Herbalists whisper about it. Healers hide it in mixtures. Still, it persists, tucked inside apothecaries and prayers alike. You meet a village midwife who uses cannabis salves to ease childbirth. She calls it mother's leaf. When the local priest frowns upon her methods, she shrugs. The Lord made it. I just use it. Her faith is simple, her results undeniable. By the late Middle Ages, hemp fields spread across Europe like patchwork, especially in England and the Low Countries. Sailors rely on it for rigging, parchment makers for paper. One sailor jokes, "Without hemp, we'd all be naked and lost at sea." Not entirely wrong. You walk along a misty English harbor, the air smelling of tar and salt, the ship's ropes creaking softly. You realize that while the spiritual use of cannabis might be suppressed, its physical legacy, hemp, continues to build empires. Every sail that catches wind, every rope that holds fast, it's the same old plant, repurposed for conquest. The irony isn't lost on you. The same herb once burned in temples for enlightenment now fuels ships of exploration and colonization. Humans, it seems, never waste a good resource, even when they forget its original meaning. And yet, even here, in the gray drizzle of medieval Europe, you catch glimpses of its secret life. A farmer crushes the seeds for oil to heal a wound. A wandering mystic smokes a strange blend and claims to see angels in the fog. Somewhere in a monastery cellar, an alchemist notes in his ledger that hemp soothes the restless heart. You smile. The world has changed, but the plant hasn't. It remains the same patient ally, waiting quietly in the background while humanity stumbles forward through its own contradictions. As night falls, you stand on the cliffs above the sea. Below, ships sway on their hemp-bound lines. Above, stars shimmer like forgotten promises. You breathe in the wind and think about how far this story has traveled, from the first wild forests to the empires of reason and faith. Somewhere in that long stretch of time, cannabis stopped being just a plant. It became a witness to your evolution, your wars, your prayers, and your endless yearning to feel whole. Morning again, those centuries have passed since your last dawn. The world now smells different, of iron, coal, and ambition. The medieval stillness has cracked open into the hum of early modern life. Hemp, once holy and humble, becomes an industry. You walk through northern Europe's river valleys, where long stalks of hemp sway like an inland sea. Peasants cut them with sickles, their hands raw but their hearts steady. Every ship, every sail, every rope that connects continents depends on these fields. It's the age of exploration now. Empires bloom on the backs of sailors and cartographers, and hemp is their silent partner. You watch workers in Holland twist thick cords around wooden spindles, singing sea shanties about faraway lands. The ropes they make will soon pull open the sails of Spanish galleons and English frigates, floating cathedrals of conquest and curiosity. A factual footnote from the archives. Queen Elizabeth I once ordered every farmer with over 60 acres of land to grow hemp, under penalty of fine. England's empire, quite literally, was tethered by hemp. Without it, the great ships of discovery and domination would have never left port. But as ships carry goods, they also carry stories, seeds, and substances. Somewhere in those damp wooden hulls, cannabis begins its global pilgrimage anew. It crosses oceans and cultures like a ghost with green fingers. Sailors carry it to Africa, where it mingles with local herbal traditions, and then to the Americas, where it takes root in soil as fresh as the new century. In India, of course, it never left. You find yourself in Varanasi, on the ghats of the Ganges, where sadhus, ascetic holy men, sit wrapped in saffron robes. They pass around a clay chillum filled with bhang, muttering blessings to Shiva, the lord of both destruction and transcendence. They say he created cannabis from his own divine body to help humans understand the eternal dance of creation and dissolution. You sit among them as dawn burns over the river, the smoke rising like incense. One sadhu, eyes half closed, says softly, "Bhang shows you what is already inside you." But gently. It's hard to tell whether he's talking to you or to the river. You exhale and watch the smoke spiral upward, dissolving into light. Cannabis here isn't escape, it's offering. In the rhythmic chants and the slow, ritual preparation, there's reverence. The plant is not used to forget the world but to see it more clearly, stripped of illusion. When you think about it, that's been its role all along, not to create visions, but to reveal them. By the 18th century, the plant has split its identities across continents. In Europe and North America, hemp remains a crop of industry, vital for rope, cloth, and paper. In the East, cannabis remains a plant of spirit, medicine, and poetry. Two faces of the same seed, mirroring humanity's own dual nature. Practical and mystical, logical and longing. You travel next to the Middle East again, this time to Cairo in the late 1700s. The air is heavy with spice and dust, and the markets hum with color. You slip into a small coffee house where men recline on cushions, sipping sweet tea and smoking long-stemmed pipes. The scent is unmistakable, not tobacco, but hashish. They laugh softly, gesture lazily, debate philosophy in half-sentences. One man quotes a poet, "The heart opens like a flower when smoke touches its edge." Another replies, "Yes, but too much smoke, and the flower wilts." Everyone nods, smiling knowingly. Moderation, it seems, has always been the eternal dance partner of pleasure. The Egyptian chroniclers of the time note hashish's growing popularity among laborers and artisans. It's illegal in theory but tolerated in practice. Authorities look the other way, until the soldiers discover it. Then come bans, raids, and public burnings of the herb. Still, people keep planting it, keep smoking it, keep laughing in the courtyards after sunset. You move west, following the smoke trails across the Mediterranean to France. It's the 1840s now, and the world has entered an age of steam and speculation. The intellectuals of Paris are intoxicated not just by absinthe and revolution but by exotic ideas and substances. You find yourself in a candlelit room, deep red with velvet curtains, surrounded by artists and writers. The Club de Hashishins, the hashish eaters. Here sits Théophile Gautier, puffing on a pipe. Next to him, a dreamy-eyed Baudelaire writes in his notebook. The poet, he murmurs, is like an alchemist, turning smoke into gold. Across the room, a young psychiatrist named Moreau de Tours observes the group with scientific curiosity, taking notes for what will become one of the first medical studies of psychoactive experiences. The hashish they eat isn't smoked but swallowed, a thick, sweet green paste called doromesque, mixed with honey, pistachios, and spices. It tastes like the memory of 1,000 nights. Within an hour, the room shifts. Light becomes liquid. Conversations stretch into symphonies. Time folds like silk. Some laugh, others weep quietly. And all of it, every flicker, every hallucination, becomes art. History will later romanticize this circle, calling them dreamers. But sitting here, you can see the deeper truth. They weren't escaping reality, they were dissecting it. The same plant that fueled rope makers and sailors now inspires poets and doctors. Hemp for empire, hashish for introspection. A perfect metaphor for the 19th century's split mind. Industrial on the outside, spiritual on the inside. A few decades later, the plant finds new homes. In Jamaica, brought by Indian laborers, it merges with African spiritual practices, becoming ganja, a sacred tool of meditation and resistance. In the Caribbean breeze, you hear a rhythm emerging, drums, chants, something that sounds like defiance in harmony. You drift through time once more. Early 1900s. The world is modernizing fast. Science dissects the plant's chemistry, assigning names like cannabinol and tetrahydrocannabinol. The magic becomes measurable. But with measurement comes suspicion. Colonial governments, moral reformers, and industrial giants all begin to frown. Laws are written. Stigmas born. In the United States, newspapers warn of marijuana madness. Politicians claim it corrupts youth, immigrants, and morality itself. It's a new kind of story, fear wearing the costume of concern. And just like that, the centuries-old companion of humanity becomes a criminal. You stand in a dim apothecary, shelves lined with amber bottles. A pharmacist sighs as he removes cannabis tincture from stock. Worked wonders for nerves, he mutters, but the law's the law. He looks tired. Behind him, the label reads, Park Davis and Company, Detroit, 1902. The irony stings. For thousands of years, the plant healed and inspired. Now it's condemned, not for what it does, but for who uses it. You realize the next chapter will be darker, filled with propaganda, persecution, and lost knowledge. Yet, somehow, you can feel it. This isn't the end. Because the plant has always been patient. It's watched empires rise and fall, seen gods invented and forgotten. And through it all, it's waited, quietly, for humanity to remember what it once knew. The stars begin to shimmer again. You inhale the night air, heavy with coal smoke and nostalgia. Somewhere in the distance, the first jazz trumpet plays. A new century is dawning. The stage is set for rebellion, rediscovery, and renewal. The story of cannabis, like humanity itself, is about to inhale deeply once more.